The hardest you've ever worked was the moment before you quit. You've seen it many times. The 2 million founder who seems relaxed, focused, and in control. Then the 200,000 founder who is white-knuckling through 14-hour days, one bad week away from collapse. They all work the same hours, they have the same level of ambition, but completely opposite results. Which means that if you're forcing yourself to be consistent, if you're pushing boulders up the mountain every day, you're just solving the wrong problem. And that is why the harder you push, the faster your system will break. After working with 400 founders, the pattern is always the same. At 200,000 a year, you have like 10 clients, 2 team members, and maybe 3 projects. At 2 million, you have 25 clients, 10 team members, and 15 active projects. In essence, your execution is 5 times bigger, but your brain has stayed the same. And you're told that scaling is just a systems problem, that you need to have better processes, so you need to hire more people. And that works until a client emergency hits you at 7 a.m. and your morning collapses, or you get triggered by a difficult conversation and you have brain fog for 3 hours, or you have to make 10 decisions by lunch, but then you're fatigued at 11 a.m. You can design the perfect system, but if you're not the right person to operate it, you will fail. Which means that in order to scale, you need to solve 2 things at the same time. One is your systems, and the other thing is your cognitive capacity. Because you can have perfect systems, but if your brain is not trained to handle the complexity you're building, you eventually collapse. And 99% of founders only solve level 1. They only focus on their systems, but they never train their brain capacity. And when you're managing a 40 people team, you context switch 5 times every single hour, which leads you to take more than 30 minutes to actually get into focused work. And that is not a lack of discipline. That is that your cognitive capacity, your brain, has been exceeded. Now, how do you fix it? Well, obviously the first fix is systems. And something that I teach my clients to do is to institute execution invariants, which are actions that you do regardless of how you feel. They're not preferences. You don't do this when conditions are good. Imagine you need to do content creation. The old system will tell you that you need to write content every morning for 60 minutes. That is a preference. It requires protected time, high energy, and be in a calm emotional state. The problem is that as you scale, your morning gets destroyed and the system collapses if you're not careful. So a new environment that I create with my clients is as soon as you have 5 minutes, record one 60-second voice note about a client insight that you can send their team to draft a script for you. 60 seconds, requires 0 planning, and it works even if you are cognitively fried. And it captures that insight before you're lost. And on good days, you can maybe record 10 voice notes. And on disaster days, you still record 1. You never hit 0 because it is an invariant. And that is how you keep the systems moving. Another example is strategic thinking. I always tell my clients to block 2 hours on Friday or on Sunday for strategic planning. That is a preference. It requires uninterrupted time, mental clarity, and complete context. The problem is that at scale, sometimes Fridays are consumed by fires, and no strategic thinking happens for months. So something I teach them to do is that before they close the laptop every single day, they write 1 sentence. Tomorrow, the 3 most important things are the following. It takes 30 seconds, works even when you're exhausted, and it keeps the strategic thread alive. So you must absolutely identify your invariants. And you do this by first, step 1, reviewing what went wrong in the most recent breakdown. What is the thing that you stopped doing that leads you to have a terrible day or week? And if nothing survived, you can ask the opposite question is, what is the smallest action that I can do to keep any of my systems alive? Back to this idea of the strategic system. If we need to plan ahead, what is the minimal smallest action that you can do? Maybe it's just write in 1 sentence the top 3 priorities for the following day, or just capture 1 insight and send it to your team in a voice note. Every single system that you manage must have an invariant that you can execute on every day, even on your worst day. Then step 2 is, can you do it in under 5 minutes? Does it require 0 decision? Can you do it when you're emotionally fried? If the answer is no to any of this, then it is not a good environment because you're going to miss it when things get tough. You must absolutely do the minimal viable execution that keeps the system alive. And finally, step 3, execute it daily for at least 1 week, ideally 2. But if you can't maintain it, then it's still too complex. And that is only level 1, the systems of your business. But the most important thing is your brain capacity. And I would argue you've never heard before that the limits to your business are the limits of your brain. Because think about it, even if your environments are perfectly mapped out, if a client triggers you with a phone call that gives you 8 out of 10 anxiety, you can record that voice note. And if your attention fragments every 90 seconds, you can sustain 60 seconds of focus. See, your brain has capacity limits in terms of how much you can sustain attention. How do you regulate your emotions when you're triggered? How many good decisions you can do when you're tired? How fast you can initiate a hard task? Those are the limits of your brain. Now, the good thing is that these are not fixed. These are trainable. And that is exactly what I train my clients in. Let me give you a very quick example of how we train this. Let's, for instance, assume that you want to train your attention control. What I train my clients in is something called ring fence session, which is a 90-minute work session with a very clear objective in which we set a timer to do one specific thing. It can be writing, it can be analyzing, it can be anything. And then as soon as the timer starts and they hit the task, they start noticing how the brain wants to get distracted, how it has the impulse of checking the phone. And that's the training. That's how you train your focus. Now, how do you train emotional regulation? Well, imagine that you are about to start a work session and you rate your emotional state. Assume that you are a 7 out of 10 anxiety. Well, you execute anyway, because doing the thing when you are dysregulated is what trains regulation. If you need to be perfectly calm, collected, and in control in order to do work, then you're barely ever going to do work, because life is messy and business is very complicated. So what you have to do is you progressively train your ability to execute irrespective of how you feel by having a system that allows you to do that. I remember a client, he was doing about 70 or 80K a month. And when we first started together, he took like half an hour to get started. He would have his phone with him all the time. He would check it like 10 times every hour. Every time one of our clients had like bad feedback, he would go into these weird loops that would last 3-4 hours in which he couldn't do anything. Now we're starting training him with ring fencing, with recoding, with a bunch of protocols that we help our clients with. And we tracked the results. And we saw that in the morning, it didn't take him more than 30 minutes to get started. It took like 5 minutes. He was not checking the phone when he was in a ring fence session. Every time he had a client mishap, he would not get 8 out of 10 anxiety anymore. He would mostly stay calm. Not perfect, I would say like 3 and 4, he would rate himself. And guess what happened? Well, I think within 6 months, he went from like 70 or 80K to about 125K. Not because he worked harder or he hired more people, or he poured more money in ads, although he did do that, but because he was more in control of his brain. He could focus for longer. He would have control over his emotion. So this is fundamental for you to understand that at any moment in time, you are limited by the systems you manage or the brain that manages those systems. And if you only solve one level, let's say that you only solve systems, you can have the perfect business structure, but you won't record that voice note. You will be too dysregulated to actually do anything about the systems that you are managing. Now, what about if you only train your brain? You are in a much better position because you can use that optimized brain to design better systems. But still, you need both. You need systems to create the right structure for you to waste no time, but also the brain to be trained to avoid distractions and doubts. When both levels are integrated, you execute fast, the invariants are clear, you waste no time, you can sustain focus for 90 minutes at a time, anxiety doesn't touch you, and over time you become the most calm, ruthless, dangerous, elite operator in business. So how do you know what are you missing? Well, if you can't execute even on good days, you have a systems problem. You need to know what to do. Your system right now requires things you don't know how to scale. But if your system works on calm days but collapses when things get stressful, you have a capacity problem. You haven't yet trained the brain to handle the load. If you execute well for a week and then fall off, you need both. Your systems can't survive chaos or stress, and your capacity cannot sustain that stress. And that's how elite founders, elite operators win, because they identify the environments they need to do even when they're very stressed, and they train their capacity to execute on them regardless of how they feel. So they no longer need to force consistency. Consistency just happens. And right now, if you're taking more than 30 minutes to start work, if you get distracted every 3 minutes, if you doubt yourself every day, if your decision making is not where it needs to be, the solution is not to work harder, my friend. The solution is to rewire your brain. The solution is to engineer your best performance, one system at a time. Because if you keep working hard all day, every day, the only thing that is guaranteed is burnout. Winners, elite founders, elite operators, do both things. Design the best systems and train their best brain. Exactly what we do at Selfmastered.